Good evening, Sean, Sean, Donna, and Sarah. Yeah, just if you can hear me, just to say we get going in 5 minutes. We've got another couple of people to join us. Unfortunately, 3 or 4 people have actually dropped out this evening, so we'll be quite a small group, but nonetheless, I'm sure quite a talented group of 6 or 5 or whatever we end up being. Thank you. Okay, good evening, everybody. It is 4 o'clock and we are waiting for quite a few people, but for your sake, basically, you're here on time. I've seen Donna. I understand that Sarah can't join us on in a vision sense. Hi, Donna. Sian, are you with us?
Sorry, yeah, I am. I was trying to find my unmute button.
Thank you, Sian. I can see that you're with us. Thank you. Okay, this is the third, basically, of the curriculum briefings. And the idea this evening is to really focus on the assessment of the curriculum, particularly with view of the foundation subjects and science in mind particularly. So I want to do a little presentation and finish off with some ideas that I've got, which hopefully might help you to just look at where you are and make decisions about whether or not this takes your thinking further on. So with all, without any more to do, I'm just going to share the screen if you don't mind. I don't know whether you've received anything from Focus. You have, great, smashing. The vast majority will be following that. Then the examples at the end will give you an idea as to how I'm sort of going forward. Is that okay? So thank you very much. So let's get going with the share screen. Thank you. And just give me a moment just to get everything ready. And hopefully, well, I've done this little bit here. I hope that if I just quickly ask you, Donna, can you see the shared screen? Give me a thumbs up. Great, lovely, thank you. Okay, so we are focusing this evening on assessment, as I've just said, and I just want us to really look at the background from which we are asked to really look at assessment generally. So the main part basically is to start with the messages from the Education Endowment Foundation, who are obviously giving us a very clear steer as far as assessment of foundation subjects are concerned. And basically what we're really looking at here is the recognition that we are really looking for long-term memory as far as the sticky knowledge for children is concerned, rather than just actually having instant knowledge immediately after the unit of learning. So this actually really gives us a very interesting sort of position to go at, because basically what they're actually saying is that within the foundation subject, within the education foundation, sorry, they're really making that point of assessing too close to the point of teaching can sometimes be misleading. It can actually give us the wrong sort of message, particularly when we're actually assuming that sticky knowledge is in place. And indeed, the short-term memory means that actually after a short while, that knowledge is forgotten by the children. So we're really looking then at finding ways of really recognizing the kind of importance really of getting this right. So basically, if we are assuming that children have learned something securely, when we've drawn that evidence too close to the point of teaching, we may be actually providing the next teacher, for instance, with some misleading information in terms of where they're going with the assessment. So one of the things that I've been looking at is obviously taking account of the information from people like Amanda Spielman, where she actually does rely an awful lot on Sweller. And Sweller is a group actually of researchers, and this came out in 2004. They are still continuing their work in different areas, but they really are making this big point that learning is only defined basically as an alteration in long-term memory. And in their view, if nothing has altered in long-term memory, then nothing has been learned. Now, that's the stance basically that Ofsted's taking in terms of looking at assessment generally of the foundation subject and indeed of the non-course, foundation subject and indeed science. So one of the challenges that faces us is to find a system that really does what it sort of says. In other words, that is assessing children's long-term knowledge, okay? And that it has been retained for the long time. Now, alongside that, we have long heard from people like Amanda Spielman of her kind of distrust, I think would be the word, of the SAT system. And if it was left to her, I'm sure we would agree, basically, that SATs would be a very different sort of process going forward. Now, because the previous Ofsted regime relied very, very heavily on data, it was inevitable, basically, that as schools, we focused very heavily on SATs, and they became a massive, massive part of any school. So basically, what has happened since has been this shift away from the data. Not that it doesn't remain important, the standards are as high as they can, of course they are, but certainly that switch to the quality of education in school has certainly been happening for some time. So in a sense, basically, if we actually are to look at this, what are the issues around SATs? Well, first time, too many children or too many parts of the SATs, we can teach children to the test, okay? And that actually is evidenced by the amount of boosting, not as much perhaps as used to go, but it's still going on in various schools. We also have all the evidence suggesting that if there is that kind of unreal amount of boosting going on, children will forget much of that information by the time they actually arrive in year 7. So one of the things that we're actually really not wanting to do is to assess foundation subjects using anything like a SATs system. And the other thing that Amanda Spielman is really, really keen on is to get away from a tick sheet mentality where we're actually recognizing the objectives and just ticking against those objectives. So she's actually almost sort of really inviting us really in primary schools to be as innovative as we can in terms of our assessment. And as you will see later, really ensuring that that doesn't add to teachers' workload in any way whatsoever. So part of this evening basically is to just share with you where my thinking has taken me and to really sort of reassure you in terms of some of the things I think that have gone down and things I've actually seen in schools, things I've trialed in schools, and to share those things with you as we actually go into the evening. So next part of this then is the recognition that we do need to think differently when it comes to our approach, okay? And basically what we've really got to do is find an approach which gives us some quality information, particularly about the gaps in children's learning and particularly about the gaps in their knowledge and skills, or should I say disciplinary knowledge rather than skills these days. And we'll come to that in a second as well. So basically what we're really looking at, that they are able to show, or the assessments we do with children show us that actually they are making progress. And the other thing is that we are able to show through this process that children will retain information for some time to come. So what we're actually looking at here is recognizing that both in the handbook from Ofsted, and the latest one was 2021, the revised handbook, and indeed the revised 219 inspection framework, there is a massive focus on pupils not just knowing more, but remembering more as the definition of actually good progress by children or within a school. So that actually kind of has become a bit of a game changer, with us looking realistically and very, very fondly basically at how do we actually get on with this, but much, much more a recognition that the assessment is within the learning rather than having a kind of a week set aside for assessment across the board generally. So one of the things that we are challenged with is, as I said, is to come up with a process that actually does that for a school, okay? Now, again, just to pick up on those sort of things, we've actually got Amanda Spielman coming in again, and this was already, although she's actually, I've taken the definition from one of her speeches in June 2018, I can assure you this is where she's coming from. So what she is saying, through her HMI people and through people like myself who carry out training for HMI, it's basically what they're really getting across to say, look, there isn't a defined way of finding the right way to assess the foundation subject. However, there are things that they want. They want school leaders, for instance, to have honest and open discussions with the inspectors, okay, about how they know children are making progress. And basically, one of the things that there's a huge expectation on is that the subject leaders, particularly working with the senior leaders in school, have defined progression within their subject, okay? So we can really clearly see that those endpoints for every single year group has been defined, and that the teacher within each of those year groups understands where children need to be if they are up to age-related expectation across the subject boundary. So basically what she is really saying is that is the assessment system you've got capable of telling you where pupils are, and is it capable of really telling you where there are gaps in children's learning? Those sort of areas become quite crucial in terms of going forward. But she also makes the point that what we might have called previously data style information, and she does in here even call it a Byzantine number system, okay, can sometimes be really meaningless when we're looking at this sort of game here. So kind of one of the things that's more and more acceptable these days to really cut out on teacher workload is to start with a pre-assumption that every child is meeting the expectation, and then recognizing the children that clearly are not, okay? And sometimes recognizing children that are showing exceptional ability, and we don't necessarily call that greater depth in this aspect here, but we simply recognizing that they are really making a movement in their understanding which may be greater than expected for their age, okay? So you can imagine a 3-column system, or rather just a 2-column system, because the middle column is nearly everybody in the first instance, with hopefully quite a lot left in there, but taking some children to the left-hand side, perhaps those who are not quite meeting the expectation, and a few children to the right-hand side, those that are showing exceptional ability. However, what does a teacher need, basically, to really help them in this regard? Now, I'm just going to pick up on what we call the 3 nuggets, basically, that Ofsted always really make a link up. There's 2 sets of them. The first basically is a huge focus on making sure that we are not adding to teacher workload in whatever system that we're coming across. That if we have a system in place, let's make sure it's an accurate measure. And thirdly, let's make sure that it has value and usefulness specifically to the next teacher the children will move on to. In addition to that, there are these, and these are the essential 3, as I call them, in terms of Ofsted's kind of scrutiny within your school. The first there, putting together the reliability and accuracy of what you're actually doing. The second, basically, is are they helping staff to know where the gaps are? And with that, obviously, what intervention would they need to support them? So therefore, finding the gaps at the end of the unit of learning may be too late. So we need to find some system in place that enables teachers to recognize that some children are not keeping up, okay? And then in the other part here is that we need to ensure that it's not adding to our teachers' workload in the same way, okay? So kind of those kind of nuggets, if you like, are the things that Ofsted has been quite keen on over the last few months in terms of its inspection processes, and realizing that we've got to really keep on top of where children are, but in a way that doesn't sort of make it feel like a testing system. Hopefully it can be built into the learning naturally, but at the same time gives us the quality of information that enables a teacher to make that assessment themselves. Now, over the last 2 sessions, I've actually introduced to the whole process, excuse me, of the link it, learn it, check it, show it, know it process, okay? Where, excuse me, I've taken some time realizing that we do need to have some sort of continuity across the school. And when a new unit of learning in history, geography, science, art, DT happens, one of the first things we should be really doing is to try and link that to children's prior knowledge, okay? Now, that doesn't mean to say the link it has to come from that same subject. For instance, the link it may come from another subject at times, or the link it may come from personal knowledge the child has. I mean, in some cases, or more than in some cases, we can really also add this on to the core subject area as much as we are to the foundation subjects and indeed to science itself. So for instance, one of the things I've been doing a lot of recently is actually using the Linkit system when reading to children in a class, okay? So an example of what I'm getting at here is to get children to link, for instance, with the emotional link that they may have with the reading that's going on. So in one case, I was reading recently, or children had read recently, rather, not so much me, had read recently, Goodnight, Mr. Tom. And to really engage the children, I did ask them to really think about the links they may have to part of the reading. And they had just read a bit about, and the thing is, Will, isn't it, being evacuated from London. And it was interesting because in this year 5 class I was in, this little lad who'd actually come from Poland over the last 3 years talked about his decision making in relation to either staying in Poland with his dad or coming over to England with his mum. And in actual fact, it was really quite interesting to hear it, because what he was actually saying was that in actual fact, that decision making may not have been as hard as the decision that Will was making in Goodnight, Mr. Tom. However, I would ascertain that probably it was a greater sort of level of decision making for him than he might have realized. And another example in year 6, when they were reading Wanda, the teacher stopped basically when that part of the story came when Augie was being bullied, okay? And in actual fact, she actually was looking for the children saying, has anybody got any links to this in their personal life? Or anything can imagine in terms of the emotion or the feeling and so on. And one of the lads actually quite sadly in a way, and quite poignantly as well, piped up that his mum was in a wheelchair and he took his mum quite a lot of places, including the park. He said, but however, he doesn't go to the park anymore because there's always a group of boys there who make fun of him and his mum. And basically, he feels really, really hurt by it. He also mentioned they happen to be at some of the shops they go to, etc., etc. And has said really how that makes an impact on him. And the fact is, and I think he used the word, which is quite interesting actually, that words don't hurt you, or some people say, but he says it does. He says it's not like a bruise, but it still hurts in so many respects. So that kind of process, basically, quite an important part in terms of getting that link right. So why are we getting the link right? Because during that process, it can help us gain an understanding of where the starting points of the children for any new unit of learning. Then we go on to the learn it and the check it, okay? And you'll hear me talk in a few moments again and again, and hear me talk a lot basically about disciplinary learning and whether or not that's got a balance between substantive and disciplinary coming across in our thinking. So effectively, what we're looking at here is using the learn it to introduce children to different aspects of the new learning we're introducing to them. We'll need to actually focus on what we call the composite. And one of the things that we are asked to do really is to really definitely ensure that we've got the big learning actually identified for children. So we know exactly what we're aiming for that learning to be. And then the important part, of course, is identifying the bite-sized components that would help children get the big learning. Now, those bite-sized components can be really, really useful in helping us understand more about exactly what does need actually assessing, simply from the point of view that what we've actually got here is a breakdown of that big learning. And then we can actually build in through the new learning these checkpoints for children, what I've called the check-its. So what I would throw in, if you like, so I'm doing something on the Romans with a year 4 class, I would actually throw in, just after we've done the bit about the Romans coming to Britain, I might throw in a kind of give me 3 reasons why the Romans came to Britain in the first place. So these would be part of what I call my hinge questions to decide whether or not enough of the children understand me to enable me to go on to the next stage. they become quite important as part of the assessment process. The show it side may well be something that could be a presentation by children on part of their learning. And I know that I think both Sian and Donna will have seen some sort of film clips I use from time to time of children actually developing that and showing that in their classrooms, working together and working alone, basically, and autonomously, and then sharing their understanding with others. Lately, however, I've actually come across more and more schools working with me, and we've developed a memory map, basically, which means that right at the end of the learning, the children put together a memory map, which really, really focuses on the learning that's actually gone on. And then the last part, beyond the learning, when that's actually done, we've done with the learning, we bring in what I call the know it and the making it stick. In other words, these are retrieval activities that we're aiming to happen after the event, as it were, in terms of children's learning. And many of you will have actually used retrieval activities yourself. Many of you will have seen the ones I use, and many I know have had a go at using some others as well. So basically, what we're really looking at here is the opportunities provided for children to really have assessment happening. So as I said in the very first bit, there are opportunities for assessment at the link it stage, so that the teacher really gets to grips with what children's understanding are in the first instance. There are certainly many opportunities in the check it position, where we're really making sure the children are really with us and understanding what they're doing before we can move on. Thirdly, we've got another opportunity in the show it stage, where they're using things like memory maps, okay, to really move things forward. And finally, basically, the retrieval activities after the finishing of the unit of learning, might be next term or even next year in some cases, give us a real understanding as to how much children have retained over time. So let's have a look at this memory map, okay? I've tried to pull one together for you to give an idea of what I actually mean. Now, I put the word Romans in there, but I'd expect the children to have that something that they would do themselves, be it whatever they're looking at, rivers, mountains, whatever, okay? But around the outside in those boxes are the components that I've actually decided are important for the children to know. Those components may not be a million miles away from, obviously, my progression map for substantive knowledge I want the children to understand in this area. So, for instance, what did the Romans do for Britain? Why did the Romans come to Britain? What evidence is there that the Romans were in Britain, which is the disciplinary side? And why did some of the Britons not like Romans? Okay, why did the Romans leave Britain? So again, you could obviously make a huge variation on those. But what I'm actually saying is that at the end of each unit of learning, we get children to create a memory map of this style. Now, it may have to vary a little bit for year one children, but I've certainly done it with year two upwards, okay? And I mean in the autumn term, so the children are really getting a point. Now, in some of the schools, and particularly what I'm thinking of in Wigan, I work with a lot, they've decided to create a book specially just for these memory maps, okay? So what they have is a hard-covered, ring-bound book, which they bought in for everybody. And the first third of that book is a history unit. My memory maps are in it. The middle third is the geography memory maps. And the final third is the science memory maps within this way of looking and working. So let me explain to you a little bit more. So this book, a child literally takes through the school with them, which then would contain all the history, all the geography, and all the science work they've learned in school. It will be actually represented on one page with them having complete autonomy about what they actually put in those boxes. However, the beauty is they also are given 10 minutes every so often to work with the partner to share their specific areas. So I've done this on the Romans, we finished it this term, say, then perhaps in a term's time, I might pair children up in my class and they look at their Roman memory map, okay? And during the talking together around that, they may well see they're adding to their learning, and obviously sort of really reassuring, or shall we say, cementing their learning in such a way because they're actually talking about it. The other thing is that as it goes on, if you can imagine a child in year 2 going all the way through to year 6, these do look quite impressive, I have to say, because it summarizes virtually the learning that's gone on in the foundation subject, the learning that's gone on in science, etc., and to really ensure that kind of bit actually works for them. Lots of children, for instance, take these away and take them to finish them off at home as part of their homework, or not homework necessarily, but almost like a voluntary aspect of taking them home, okay? And I've seen that work and be a real success in so many schools that I'm really convinced that this could be one way of looking at assessing and getting that quality information that as a teacher I would want about children's understanding of where we're coming from. Now, that alone perhaps won't be enough. Then I feel we've got room for the quizzes to come in. And that's what I want to share later on with you this evening, some examples for you to really sort of give you a kind of an understanding of where I'm actually going with this, okay? So in the first place then, it's actually saying, I see the kind of the memory maps that I've just shown you as one element basically of the assessment. And that combined with some of the quizzes may well give us quite a good quality information. Now, again, you may be doing something very different in your school. And don't forget, this session is for you to just sit back and think about what you're doing currently and ask, does what I'm presenting add something to that? Or do you feel that what you've got already actually works for you? Okay, so please don't think, oh, this is the way, or I'm trying to present it in that way. What I am doing, the advantage that I do have of going from school to school to school on a daily basis, what I'm trying to put together is the best of the practice, some of which I've had direct influence on, some I've had less influence on as we go through. So I'll come to the quizzes in a few minutes because it's a massive part for me of our kind of looking at things. Now, one of the issues I'm finding with the quizzes that I've seen across schools is there isn't a balance between that substantive knowledge and the disciplinary knowledge within the school, okay? So coming back to and reminding us really, the substantive knowledge, in my view, is by far and away the easier aspect to really assess, okay? Through a low-stake quiz, if you like, in that way. Because we're really asking children to regurgitate something about something they've looked at. And here are some examples I put there. Know what the main features of a river are, okay? So basically, they will be regurgitating something because it's just to do with the rivers unit. The Romans one there, know what the Romans did to improve Britain. We can only do that because we are doing Romans at the moment, okay? Know the names and parts of a plant or a tree. We can only be doing that when we're looking at plants, when we're looking at trees and so forth. So kind of what we're coming to here then is, the last one on there is an art one, because in art, basically the substantive knowledge is knowledge of the individual artist as such, okay? So knowing which techniques that Van Gogh used or Monet used would be indeed very much a substantive part of it. The disciplinary side, okay, as you probably are aware, and I've gone through with you before, so please forgive me for going through it again, but I think it's important in the context of assessment, okay? What we're really saying here, it's the bit that makes them historians, geographers, scientists, etc., etc. So what we are aiming to do is obviously things like appreciation between long ago and very long ago, appreciation between the difference between a primary and a secondary source of evidence, the appreciation of the understanding, if you like, of which evidence is more or less significant within that, use of an OS map, for instance, to find specific place on a map, ability to sketch something which they can use later on in a study, and in a science context, really understanding how to isolate a particular variable to really carry out a fair test. So kind of The second set there are very different to the first set, okay? So quizzes I've seen by and large offer just that top end, just the substantive knowledge, because they are easier. I know for my own sake how much quicker it is to put a substantive knowledge situation together rather than actually assess the children's disciplinary knowledge in that particular event. So first of all, basically what we're really saying here, it is really important before assessment can be as accurate as you'd wish it to be, that the progression maps for each of your subjects are as accurate as they can be, that they don't have too many features in, because you're really talking of knowledge children are going to take with them for the rest of their lives, okay? So that really becomes quite important. So we'll, alongside that then, on the substantive side, just before we get there, there are some examples I'm going to share with you. There won't necessarily be these two, but what I have been doing recently is to put some low-stake quizzes together, which does include disciplinary knowledge for history and indeed for geography. And I'd like to share a couple of examples with you in a few minutes, if I may, just to give you a chance to have a look at them and to get back to me with your thoughts, etc., alongside those. So for instance, okay, one of the things I'm really keen to do on the science side is to bring in a lot of that disciplinary knowledge into the investigations we're asking children to do. So for instance, okay, yes, I could set up some investigations, or I could set some experiments as part of an assessment. And I know that there are some excellent examples out there already, and of some people that do that. So that's why I concentrate on in history and geography first, because they're there. But for instance, okay, just to say to you, one of the problems I have with working scientifically, which is the disciplinary side of the science curriculum, is that teachers very, very often, with all the best will in the world, actually give the children far too much. In other words, if I'm setting up or asking children to set up an investigation, if I actually supply them with the resources, I've already actually taken a big step in helping them along the way. Whereas in actual fact, I would actually set out resources for children and even put in a couple of red herrings, if I'm being honest with you, to really see how that would work. So here, for instance, is an example of year 6 work. Okay, this happens to be an experiment, say, to show how light travels in a straight line. And my kind of investigation for the children is for them to tell me whether or not they could set up an experiment to find out. However, what I wanted to show you was this, okay? This is where my starting point would be with them. I would get them to really focus on what the planning stage was like for them. In other words, I'm really keen on finding out how they set about that, finding that piece of investigation, be it the light or anything else. And I call it the planning stage, and get children to ask questions like, have I clarified exactly what this investigation is about? Okay, what do I consider to be the most difficult part of this investigation that I'm about to do? What do I already know about the way light travels? Okay, have I been able to gather the right resources I need to complete this task? Did my partner agree with my ideas I put forward? Did I take up any of my partner's idea? How much of my original ideas remains after we've perhaps formed a slightly larger group? Now, all of that, basically, getting children to think in that way gets them to think like scientists, okay? I often remind children that things like, for instance, the vaccination we received for COVID didn't come to the first attempt. And that in science particularly, we actually learn such a lot from our mistakes or where we haven't got it quite right. We can actually move that on and do a better attempt the second time around, etc., etc. So one of the big things I think I like to get across to children on that investigative side, on that experimentation side, when they are working scientifically, is that probably their first attempts may well not exactly tell us what we need to know, but they will learn from that if they've done it properly. On the doing stage, as you can see there, that's where I get them to really, really question themselves when they've started setting up their investigation. And the things I really love them to do is to seriously consider whether they have actually set it up in the right way, whether another system could be more helpful, okay? Are they, for instance, prepared to stop and rethink their idea halfway through if they know this isn't going to be highly successful, okay? Those sort of things really become a very, very important aspect for me. So in that sort of regard, that kind of consideration helps me think that they are working scientifically. And on the evaluation side, this is what they would write up, obviously, about what they've actually found, including the mistakes they've made, including, of course, how they might set it up differently if they were setting off from the beginning again. But what I want to point out is that's how I want the write-up to be at the end. So in all my writing scientifically examples, children will write to the planning stage, the doing stage, and the evaluation stage. Those three distinct stages is what I get them to write up about, rather than anything to do with apparatus, method, results, etc., etc. I get them to write in that way. Following this up really means that we are actually developing metacognitive learners in our classroom, because we are consistently asking them to think about their thinking, think about their learning as they're actually doing this type of work, okay? So for me, it's quite an important stage in that setup for them to do. To aid that a little bit, one of the other things I've done, incidentally, this is just there to show you that I am interested in diagrams and so on coming in as well. The other thing I've done is recognizing that for science, in the national curriculum, working scientifically is set up in year 1 and 2 together, 3 and 4 together, 5 and 6 together. Now in year 1 and 2, it's the bit on the left-hand side. If you go to your national curriculum, there are the 6 major things they're asking us to do. In other words, I know how to ask simple scientific questions. I know how to use simple equipment to make observations. I know how to carry out simple tests. I know how to identify and classify things. I know how to explain to others what I have found out, and I know how to use simple data to answer questions. However, what would be the difference between that in a year 1 class and a year 2 class? So on the right-hand side, for instance, let's take that first one. I know how to ask simple scientific questions. So what I've tried to look at there is what sort of questions would I typically expect from year 1 children, okay? So things like, why are flowers different colors? What do some animals eat? So why do some animals eat meat and others do not? That type of question from a child in year 1 would give me a big tick, as it were, to tell me that they are actually working at the right level scientifically, or their disciplinary knowledge in science is actually as it should be for their age. Because in year 2, I would expect those questions to be a little bit more, shall we say, a little bit more kind of deep, okay? So things like, why do some trees lose their leaves in autumn and others do not? How long are roots of tall trees? And why do some animals have underground habitats, okay? Those would be the kind of typical questions I might expect from a year 2 child visiting year 1 child. And then, as you can see, I'm not going to go through them all, you'd be glad to know, but I fit in the national curriculum and trying to push that out in terms of what does it look like in year 2, what does it look like in year 1, okay? And then obviously doing exactly the same in year 3. Now in year 3 and 4, there are far more on the left-hand side, as I'd say to you, in other words, in the national curriculum, okay? But you notice I know how to ask relevant scientific questions remains, okay? So now I'm looking at that and saying, do they ask questions such as, why does the moon appear in different shapes in the night sky? Why does my shadow change during the day? Where does a fossil come from? Those would be kind of the type of questions that I would link with being a year 3 child, okay? As against, sorry, this goes over 2 pages, as against in year 4, we might be looking at why is steam and ice the same thing? Why is the liver important in our digestive system? What do we mean by pitch when it comes to sound? Maybe some of the questions that we might have for children. Now, as you can see from this, in year 3, 4, the expectations on the left-hand side are much greater than they are in years 1 and 2. And as we go on to year 5 and 6, you can see there are, again, a number of issues. I know how to plan different types of scientific inquiry, okay? I know how to control variables in an inquiry. I know how to measure accurately and precisely using a range of equipment. So they are there for year 5, and then I've put exemplars of what that might look like for year 6 children, okay? So the things I've tried to do in enabling me to assess science more accurately is, first of all, to look at working scientifically. With all due respect, it's straightforward to actually assess the substantive knowledge, okay? The pure scientific knowledge, I think I can really do, and I think the vast majority of teachers teaching children can actually set up a low-stake quiz on the substantive side. What I am saying is, if I'm setting it up for science on the disciplinary side, we need to first of all deal with what is working scientifically, what does it look like on a year-by-year basis, what are the exemplars I would actually bring to that, okay? I just wanted to bring those in for you, and then also share with you what I've tried to do on the history and geography. So I'm just going to come out of the share screen for a second, okay, and dive into looking at these exemplars here. So the first of the example is a history example, okay? I'm going to share this with you. It happens to be the Stone Age, okay? And you'll notice in my sort of query here, I'm assuming, okay, let me just quickly get this to a full screen. Sorry. Okay, I hope that you can see that now, okay? This is the history Stone Age. This is one of the units I do in linking it to what I call the Learning Challenge curriculum. And as you can see, what I'm doing is giving, in the first instance, substantive knowledge by giving a kind of a multi-choice situation. So, for instance, which of these periods is the oldest? Is it the Neolithic, the Paleolithic, or the Mesolithic age? Okay. Which of the following places are associated with the Stone Age period? Is it Sutton Hoo? Is it Skara Brae? Is it Hadrian's Wall? Or is it Stonehenge? Now, 2 of those are associated with the Stone Age period. Okay. Third one, as you can see here, which of these were major discoveries or inventions during the Stone Age period? Again, there are 2 of them. Was it the light bulb? Was it the wheel? Was it aqueducts, or was it iron ore? Okay. And again, the 4th one, as you can see there, which of these is the correct sequence of Stone Age times? Is it Stone Age followed by the Iron Age followed by the Bronze Age? Or is it the Iron Age first, Bronze Age and Stone Age? Or is it Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age? Or is it Bronze Age, Stone Age and Iron Age? Okay. So basically what I'm trying to show you there is to get children to think in a multi-answer way. Obviously, there's one answer that's correct in this one, and it's obviously C. And clearly what I'm trying to do is to help them. If a child isn't necessarily going to be handicapped, perhaps their ability to read, because they can have this read to them, obviously, or indeed their ability to actually need to write in greater detail. So, for instance, number 5 there, what do we mean by hunter-gatherers? Do we actually mean people who ate only fish? Do we mean people who hunted animals and gathered berries and fruits? Or do we mean vegetarian people? Okay. And in which of the ages did the hill forts appear? Was it the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, or the Iron Age? And then we ask the question, where is Skara Brae? Is it in England, Scotland, or Wales? Okay. And then into number 8 there, why was the invention of the wheel important during the Stone Age period? And again, there's a multi-choice opportunity. It allowed Stone Age people to move around in cars. It allowed Stone Age people to move heavy objects around much easier, or help Stone Age children to make up games, okay? And then the 9th question on the substantive knowledge side, why was the discovery of iron ore important? And is it A, they could melt the iron ore and make tools and weapons much easier? They could throw the iron ore rocks at their enemies. or it helped them to build better houses. Okay. And then there's the last one at the bottom there. Which of these people have helped us find out about the way Stone Age people live? And on mine, there's a kind of, can't quite see the correct answer, which is actually the correct answer being archaeologists, and it's not astrologists, and it's not kings and queens of England either. Then on the disciplinary side, these are the two questions I'm looking at. So I provide them with two sheets. Look at the images of Skara Brae in sheet 1 and set out 5 things you know about the way they lived. Now, I'll show you sheet 1 in a minute, and then look at the list on sheet 2 and work out which 2 pieces of reliable evidence can we use to work out how we know about Stone Age period. Now, children's answers are actually locked into these bits here, okay? And the 2 sheets I'm talking about, these are photographs taken of Skara Brae, and as a result of that, what can we say about the way they lived, okay? That's what I'm after from them, for them to actually do that. And then on the other side here, looking at the list here, look at the following list and work out what reliable evidence has helped us build the picture of what happened during the Stone Age period. Is it A, photographs taken during the Stone Age period? Well, clearly not, okay? Internet information from the Stone Age period? Clearly not. Photographs taken at Skara Brae today? Well, that's been helpful, okay? Information from archaeologists has also been helpful. Word of mouth down, it's just almost impossible to pass it down over that period of time and rely upon that as information. Books written by people who lived during the Stone Age period, again, interview someone who was alive, not at all, a newspaper. From this list, there are 2 reliable sources, okay? And obviously, it's actually C and D from our case, which they would then actually represent in there. So what I'm trying to show you is that would be my low-stake quiz. I would use that immediately after the unit is finished, but again use the same quiz later on at the end of the next term as well, so that if it's a new teacher, they can have information around this to help them. But also, really, if it's the same sort of year group, in other words, if you did this in the autumn term and you do this quiz again in the spring term, it gives you some information about how children are retaining information over the long term, okay? So if I can just stop this one, just before coming back to you, and then just going on, if I may, to look at the geography example. Okay, here. And if I just get into full screen with you. Okay, this is kind of the geography one. This time it's looking at the United Kingdom, okay? And I've been looking at that. So in this case, it's name 4 countries that make up the United Kingdom. Name the 4 capitals of the countries of the United Kingdom. Name the 3 seas that surrounds the UK. Name the 3 rivers in the UK, any 3 rivers in the UK. Name 3 mountain regions in the UK. And then name the 5 islands set out on sheet 1. And name the 5 cities set out on sheet 2. And then name 3 coastal counties, okay? Name 3 counties in the northwest, 3 counties in the southwest. Name the 2 towns or cities north of Newcastle, which is sheet 3. Name 2 towns or cities east of Leicester, which is sheet 3. Name a northern town or city situated near the M6, which is sheet 4. The M4 runs from London and ends close to which Welsh city, and which is the motorway that surrounds London, sheet 4. So just bear with me for a second while I show you those sheets. Those are the islands, okay? Children have got the answers there, and they've got to work out which is which. Again, which cities are these? Manchester, London, Newcastle, Birmingham, and Bristol. And then this is the one which goes to the disciplinary side, which gets them to use maps in a different way, naming 2 towns or cities north of Newcastle. name 2 towns or cities east of Leicester, okay, from that given map, and then use an atlas to help us name a northern town or city situated near the M6. The M4 runs from London and ends close to Whitwell City. Now they'll be given a map, an atlas to do this work with, which is the motorway that surrounds London, and true or false, the M5 would take you towards Bristol, okay? Now, basically what you're looking at there is that balance between, hopefully, the substantive knowledge the children would need alongside the disciplinary knowledge that I would ask them to look at. So what I wanted to do was to say, look, from this situation, I've seen lots and lots of people try and put kind of assessment together. Very, very often it's overdone with the substantive knowledge and not enough discipline, okay? The other thing was looking at it from a scientific point of view by taking those units from the national curriculum and looking at what working scientifically means in year 1 and 2, what it also means in year 3 and 4, what it means in year 5 and 6, and try and actually, first of all, separate those where possible, okay? So that's what I wanted to share with you this evening. I don't know if that's any help at all. Sian, in your school, I know that you've done an awful lot of work around assessment generally, haven't you? And I'm just wondering if that helped at all for you to take that a little bit further.
Yeah, it did. I like the idea of the maps thing and building up that book throughout the school.
Now, hang on a second, I've just realised I think my sound system is not where it should be, so just bear with me. Sorry, Sian, can you say that again?
All right. I like the idea of the memory maps and building those up through the school that they take up with them. We're currently developing our own knowledge organisers for the children that sort of set out those components and the composites and everything else. So we've been using them as an assessment tool.
Good.
We've just started assessing in music by doing videos and
Oh,
things like that. So I like those memory maps. They're quite a nice idea to take on.
Yeah. They look quite nice, actually, Sian. I promise you, when you've got a few in the book, they really do look quite nice. And just to add to your music bit, I'm actually getting, just like you would with writing expectations, I've got art expectations for sketching, for painting, and for 3-dimensional work. And it's actually really building on that to really help staff be a little bit more clear about where some of that really comes into. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Donna, thank you, Sian. Donna, what about you? Was that helpful to you? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, well, look, I'm going to let you go. I've got to go down to Oxford now for my sins, so there you are. Keep me out of mischief for a little while anyway. So I hope to see you again soon. I'm sorry it was such a short group. There were 8 of us supposed to be on this tonight, so I don't know what's actually happened in relation to that. We'll soon find out, no doubt. Okay.
Clive,
Thanks,
sorry,
Sarah,
could I just could I just ask one quick question, please? You know, in terms of the latest Ofsted framework, when you read through that in terms of the quality of education part of it, it refers to knowledge and skills. But we, as a profession, there seems to be this wave of substantive and disciplinary that's hit it, when really it's just knowledge and skills. Why are we doing? Why can't we just say knowledge and skills? You need to ask Amanda Spielman on that one. She is adverse to using the word skills under any circumstances, Sarah, and that's one of the reasons it came from there. Now, interestingly, although it does say skills and knowledge, or knowledge and skills in the framework, I've noticed myself that in school, inspectors are referring to substantive knowledge and disciplinary knowledge more and more so. So that may be a kind of a guidance to you there, Sarah. I think it's important the staff at least have an understanding that it is more or less knowledge and skills, but disciplinary knowledge is a little bit more than that. Does that make sense? Okay, because of some of those disciplines, particularly in the history side, and particularly perhaps in some of the field sketches, which we might not have called skills before, but they do come under that disciplinary knowledge side in terms of that. So in terms of being cautious about it all, I would actually ensure that disciplinary knowledge is a term that most of your staff are familiar with, even if they just think of it as skills. Right, okay.
Is that okay?
Thanks very much. Yeah,
thanks,
thank
Sarah.
you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Hope you charge better soon. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Okay, take care.
Bye.